In the wreckage of a Boeing crash in the snowy mountains, a single father rescue worker finds a young woman, wounded and unconscious, the only survivor. Neither of them knows how completely she will change his life. Stay until the end, because sometimes the miracle you need is the one you're meant to save. The radio crackled to life in Jake Carter's truck as he navigated the winding mountain road, snow falling in thick flakes against his windshield. All available rescue personnel report to Black Ridge Pass. Confirmed Boeing 737 down, multiple casualties expected. Jake's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. At 38, he'd spent 15 years as a forest maintenance worker and volunteer rescuer in the small mountain town of Pinecrest. But aviation disasters were mercifully rare. He turned the truck around, his mind already running through emergency protocols. "Dad, what's happening?" Ben's small voice came from the back seat. Jake caught his son's worried eyes in the rearview mirror. At 8 years old, Ben was already too familiar with tragedy. "I need to help some people, buddy. I'm going to drop you at Mrs. Miller's, okay?" The boy nodded solemnly. Since losing his mother 4 years ago in the icy road accident that still haunted Jake's dreams, Ben had become quiet, withdrawn, the kind of child who watched rather than participated, the kind of child other kids sensed weakness in and exploited. After dropping Ben off, Jake pushed the old truck as fast as he dared up the mountain road. The emergency lights of other vehicles were already visible near the ridge where the plane had gone down. The scene was chaos. Fragments of white and blue fuselage scattered across the snowy landscape like broken eggshells. Rescue workers moving in grim choreography. "Carter, take the eastern perimeter," Sheriff Donahue called. "Search for survivors, but—" The unfinished sentence hung in the frigid air. "But don't expect to find any." Jake trudged through knee-deep snow, the specialized thermal scanner in his hand sweeping methodically. The cold bit through his layers, but adrenaline kept him moving. Hour after hour, all teams reported the same: bodies, not survivors. As dusk approached and the search was about to be called off until morning, Jake's scanner picked up a faint heat signature beneath a section of wing half buried in snow. He dug frantically, gloved hands scooping away ice and debris until he uncovered a pale hand, then an arm, then the face of a young woman. She was ghostly white, dark hair matted with blood, but a small cloud of breath escaped her blue lips. Impossibly, she was alive. "I found a survivor," Jake shouted into his radio, his voice cracking. "East Quadrant, Section F. She's alive." He cleared snow from her body, noting with professional detachment the awkward angle of her left leg, the gash across her forehead. As he wrapped her in thermal blankets, her eyelids fluttered open momentarily. Disoriented hazel eyes met his, filled with terror and confusion, before closing again. Near her hand lay a small nameplate, the kind flight attendants wore, partially crushed but still legible. "EL. She shouldn't be alive," Dr. Morse said 3 days later, reviewing charts at the makeshift medical center in Pinecrest's community hall. The town was too small for a proper hospital, and the winter storm had made airlifting patients to the city impossible. Severe concussion, broken femur, hypothermia, and trauma-induced amnesia. Yet her vitals are stabilizing. Jake stood at the foot of the woman's bed, watching her breathe. He'd visited each day, drawn by something he couldn't name. Professional concern, he told himself. He'd found her, after all. "Any ID?" he asked. "That's the strange part," Sheriff Donahue said, joining them. "The airline has no record of an L on their crew. The passenger manifest doesn't match her either. According to every official record, she wasn't on that plane." Jake frowned. "That's impossible. I found her in the wreckage." "I'm not saying you didn't," the sheriff's voice lowered, "but it raises questions. Who boards a plane without being logged? Why was she there? Some folks in town are talking. Small towns and their rumors. Jake knew how quickly speculation could turn ugly. What happens to her now? Once she's stable, federal authorities will take over. Until then?" The sheriff shrugged. That evening, Jake returned to find the woman, Elle as they'd taken to calling her, awake, sitting up in bed, staring vacantly at the wall. The bruising around her eyes had darkened to purple crescents, making her pale face seem even more fragile. "Hello," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "I'm Jake Carter. I found you in the snow." She turned slowly, wincing with the movement. "They told me, thank you." Her voice was raspy, unused. "They also told me I'm a mystery, that I shouldn't have been there. Do you remember anything? Your name, why you were on the flight?" She pressed her palm against her forehead. "Nothing, just fragments, cold, screaming. Then you." Her hands trembled. "They want me to remember, but every time I try, it feels like I'm falling again." Jake sat in the chair beside her bed. "The doctor says it's normal with head trauma. Memory might come back in pieces, or all at once, or never," she finished. "What will happen to me?" Fear crept into her voice. "They keep asking questions I can't answer. I have nowhere to go, no identity. Jake made the decision before he realized he was making it. "You need time to heal, somewhere quiet." "Is there a shelter in town?" "No, but I have a spare room in my cabin. It's nothing fancy, but it's peaceful." She studied him, wariness in her gaze. "Why would you help a stranger?" It was a fair question. Jake wasn't known for his spontaneous generosity. Since losing Sarah, he'd kept to himself, focused on Ben, on survival. "Because everyone deserves a chance to remember who they are," he said finally. Despite medical objections and raised eyebrows from the sheriff, 2 days later Jake helped Elle into his truck. The town buzzed with speculation. Some neighbors nodded approvingly at his compassion. Others whispered darkly about strange women with suspicious pasts. Ben sat silently in the back seat, studying Elle with the serious contemplation of a child who has learned early that life can change in an instant. Elle caught him looking and offered a tentative smile. To Jake's surprise, Ben smiled back. A small, rusty thing, but the first real smile he'd given a stranger in years. "Careful with the crutches on those steps," Jake cautioned as they entered the cabin. It was a sturdy structure of pine and stone, built by his grandfather, expanded by his father, now his. 3 generations of Carter men had maintained the forests around Pinecrest from this base. Elle stood in the doorway, taking in the open living area with its stone fireplace, the kitchen with its dated appliances, the wooden staircase leading to the bedrooms. It was clean but Spartan, a home maintained by a man who saw domesticity as a series of tasks to be completed rather than a comfort to be created. "It's lovely," she said softly. "Dad doesn't use the sitting room much," Ben volunteered, the most words he'd strung together at once in Elle's presence. "We mostly eat in the kitchen." "Your room is downstairs," Jake explained, "so you won't have to manage the stairs with that leg." The first days were awkward, a delicate dance of 3 strangers, trying not to intrude on each other's space. Elle slept most of the time, her body demanding rest to heal. When awake, she sat by the window, watching the snow, sometimes scribbling in a notebook Jake had given her, trying to capture fleeting memories before they evaporated. Jake worked his forest maintenance shifts, coming home to a house that smelled different, of the herbal tea Elle drank, of the lavender soap she'd requested on their single shopping trip to town. Small changes that reminded him his home was no longer just his. A week into her stay, Jake came home to find Ben and Elle at the kitchen table, surrounded by construction paper, scissors, and glue. "We're making a diorama for my science project," Ben explained, eyes bright with enthusiasm. "It's about forest ecosystems. Elle used to be a..." He stopped, looking uncertainly at Elle. "I don't know if I was anything," she said gently. "But I remember how to make paper trees, somehow." Her hands moved with practiced precision, folding and cutting, creating delicate 3-dimensional trees. Muscle memory, Jake thought, fragments of a life she couldn't recall. That night, after Ben was in bed, Jake found Elle sitting by the fire, her injured leg propped on a footstool. "Thank you," he said, "for helping Ben. He doesn't usually warm up to people. He's a special boy, observant. He notices everything." She hesitated. "He told me about his mother." "I'm sorry." Jake nodded stiffly. Even after 4 years, Sarah's absence was a wound that reopened easily. Black ice. The car rolled 3 times. They said she didn't suffer. Small comfort. The smallest. He stared into the fire. Ben was in the car. He remembers everything. Hasn't been the same since. Children are more resilient than we think, Elle said, then frowned, as if surprised by her own words. You sound like you know something about children. Maybe I did, her voice caught. I wish I could remember. It's like having a word on the tip of your tongue, but it's my entire life that I can't quite grasp. As February turned to March, Elle's physical injuries healed faster than her memory. She graduated from crutches to a cane, began cooking meals, simple at first, then increasingly complex dishes that suggested culinary training. She knew how to iron shirts perfectly, fold fitted sheets, speak phrases in what sounded like French. Each remembered skill was celebrated, each a piece of the puzzle. That was Elle. But the larger picture, who she was, why she was on that plane, remained elusive. In town, Jake heard the whispers. Some said she was running from the law, others that she was part of some elaborate insurance fraud. The most charitable suggested she was fleeing an abusive relationship. Jake ignored them all, protective of the fragile peace they'd established in the cabin. One night, he was awakened by screams. He found Elle thrashing in her bed, caught in a nightmare's grip. Elle, wake up, it's Jake, you're safe. He gently shook her shoulders. She woke with a gasp, eyes wild and unseeing. Don't let them take me back, she begged, clutching his arm. Please, don't send me back. Back where? Elle, who are you afraid of? But she was already slipping back into troubled sleep, tears streaking her face. Jake stayed until her breathing steadied, troubled by her terror. Whoever she had been, whatever life she had fled, it had left her deeply afraid. The next morning, she remembered nothing of the nightmare, but the haunted look in her eyes remained. As spring approached, Elle became more integrated into their lives. She helped Ben with homework, listened to Jake's stories of the day's work, brought warmth to a home that had been functional but joyless. Sometimes, Jake caught himself watching her. The graceful way she moved, the gentle patience she showed Ben, the quiet strength with which she faced each day of uncertainty. And sometimes, he caught her watching him too. I thought I'd find you here, Sheriff Donahue's voice cut through the peaceful afternoon. Jake had been repairing fence posts at the forest boundary, enjoying the first truly warm day of spring. Something wrong, Sheriff? Got some visitors in town, federal agents and a private investigator. Donahue removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. They're asking about your house guests. Jake's stomach tightened. What about her? Apparently, satellite images from the crash site got someone's attention. They're saying she couldn't have been a passenger because she boarded under false pretenses, using forged documents. That's ridiculous. Is it? None of us know who she really is, Jake, including her. The sheriff sighed. They want to interview her. Today. Jake drove home faster than was safe on the winding roads, mind racing. Ella was in the garden behind the cabin, helping Ben plant the vegetable seedlings they'd started indoors weeks ago. She looked up, smile fading as she read his expression. What's happened? We need to talk. Ben, go inside, please. Once the boy was out of earshot, Jake explained the situation. Elle's face drained of color. Really think I'm some kind of criminal? They think you were traveling under a false identity. Were you running from something, Elle? I don't know. Her voice rose in frustration. Don't you think I'd tell you if I remembered? Jake studied her face, searching for deception. Would you? Sometimes I wonder if you remember more than you let on. Hurt flashed in her eyes. You don't trust me. I want to, but this affects my son too. They were still standing in tense silence when two black SUVs pulled up to the cabin. 4 men emerged, 2 in FBI windbreakers, 1 in a sheriff's uniform, and a well-dressed older man with silver hair who surveyed the property with calculating eyes. Mrs. Eleanor Lockwood, the older man called, approaching Elle. Or do you prefer Elle? Elle froze, recognition flickering across her face at the name. Mr. Lockwood has identified you as his daughter, one of the FBI agents explained to Jake. She's been missing for 3 months, ever since breaking off her engagement and disappearing. Eleanor? The silver-haired man said, his voice softening with what might have been concern or might have been performance. It's time to come home. Whatever game you're playing has gone far enough. Game? Elle whispered, backing away. I nearly died. A regrettable accident. But you shouldn't have been on that flight. Using forged documents, evading your security detail. His smile tightened. The wedding is still on hold. Martine has been very understanding about your episode. Jake watched understanding dawn on Elle's face, memories clicking into place like tumblers in a lock. I remember, she said, her voice stronger now. I remember who I am, who you are. She turned to Jake. He's telling the truth. I'm Eleanor Lockwood. My father is Richard Lockwood of Lockwood Industries. Jake recognized the name. Lockwood Industries was a multinational corporation worth billions. You ran away, he said, not a question. From an arranged marriage, disguised as a love match. A business merger with a man 30 years my senior, wrapped up with a diamond ring. Her voice was bitter. When I refused, my father had me forcibly sedated, told the world I was having a nervous breakdown. I escaped, used connections to get new papers, boarded that flight to disappear somewhere they'd never find me. Richard Lockwood's expression hardened. You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Eleanor. These delusions, they're not delusions. Elle's voice cracked. I remember everything now. How you controlled every aspect of my life. How Mother died and you turned me into your project, your possession. I remember the doctors who kept me compliant, the security guards who were really prison wardens. She turned to the FBI agents. I'm 30 years old. I left of my own free will. I committed identity fraud, yes, but only to escape what amounted to imprisonment. These are serious allegations, one agent said, looking uncomfortable. Which will be dismissed the moment my legal team gets involved, Richard said smoothly. My daughter has a history of mental health issues. Ask her doctors. Doctors you pay, Elle shot back. Jake stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Elle and her father. Seems to me this is a family dispute, not a federal case. Eleanor is an adult. She can decide where she wants to go. Richard Lockwood's eyes narrowed. And who exactly are you? The mountain man who's been harboring my mentally unstable daughter? Perhaps benefiting from her vulnerability? Jake felt his hands curl into fists, but kept his voice level. I'm the man who pulled her from the wreckage when everyone else was looking for bodies. The man who's watched her heal and rebuild herself, piece by piece, without any help from her supposedly caring family. The sheriff cleared his throat. Mr. Lockwood, while I understand your concern, Miss Lockwood doesn't appear to be in any danger here. Without evidence of a crime beyond identity fraud, which I understand you're not pressing charges for, we can't force her to leave. Richard's smile was cold. Then I'll be filing for emergency guardianship on grounds of mental incompetence. Her doctors will support this. By this time tomorrow, Eleanor will be coming home where she belongs. Elle's face went white. Jake. Get in the house, Jake said quietly. Take Ben and lock the door. I'll handle this. After a tense standoff, the visitors left with promises to return with court orders. Inside, Jake found Elle sitting at the kitchen table, Ben's small hand clasped in hers, both looking shell-shocked. You believe me, right? She asked, voice small. That I'm not crazy? I believe you, Jake said simply, and I won't let them take you anywhere against your will. You can't stop them. My father has unlimited resources, connections everywhere. So we don't fight on his terms? Jake sat across from her. The question is, what do you want, Elle? Now that you remember who you are, do you want to reclaim your life? You're Eleanor Lockwood, heiress to a fortune. Elle looked around the modest kitchen, at Ben's worried face, at Jake's steady presence. This is the first place I felt like myself. Not Eleanor Lockwood, the perfect daughter. Not Elle, the amnesia patient. Just me. Whoever that is. She squeezed Ben's hand. I want to stay. If you'll have me. Then we fight, Jake said. By morning, the town of Pinecrest was divided. Some residents, swayed by Richard Lockwood's charm and implied promises of economic development for the region, viewed Elle as a spoiled heiress playing Mountain House. Others, who had come to know her over the past months, rallied behind the woman who volunteered at the library's children's hour and remembered everyone's coffee preferences at the diner. Jake worked methodically, making calls to an old army buddy who'd become a lawyer in Denver, gathering statements from Dr. Morris about Elle's sound mental state, documenting her recovery and integration into the community. Sheriff Donahue visited mid-morning, looking uncomfortable. Thought you should know, Jake. Lockwood's people are talking to the school board, suggesting Ben might benefit from specialized educational opportunities in the city. Jake's blood ran cold. Is that a threat? Sounds like one to me. The sheriff hesitated. Off the record? I don't like how this feels. Throwing money and influence around trying to buy a woman's freedom. Reminds me why I never left Pinecrest for the big city. When the sheriff left, Jake found Elle in the garden, digging with more force than necessary. They're trying to use Ben to get to me, she said before he could speak. I heard. I should go, Jake, before your family gets hurt in my war. We're already in this, all of us. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. You don't understand what he's capable of. My father doesn't lose, ever. Neither do I, Jake said, and meant it. Not when it matters. That afternoon, they received notice of an emergency guardianship hearing scheduled for the following day in the county courthouse. Elle's father had indeed moved quickly, flying in specialists who were prepared to testify about her fragile mental state and history of delusional episodes. Jake's lawyer friend arrived by nightfall, grim-faced but determined. It's an uphill battle, he admitted, but we've got one advantage. Small-town judges tend to be suspicious of big city power plays, and we've got a community willing to testify on Elle's behalf. Indeed, throughout the evening, neighbors arrived at the cabin. Mrs. Miller from the bakery brought bread and casseroles. Ben's teacher came with signed statements from school staff about Elle's positive influence on the boy. Even gruff old Mr. Peterson, who rarely left his farm, showed up to offer his shotgun, politely declined, and his testimony about seeing Elle help a lost dog find its way home during a snowstorm. I didn't realize, Elle said, watching the steady stream of supporters. I didn't know they cared. Small towns, Jake explained. Suspicious of outsiders until they're not, then they protect their own. That night, after Ben was asleep and the house was quiet, Jake found Elle sitting on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the spring chill. What if we lose tomorrow? She asked softly. Jake sat beside her, the swing creaking gently beneath their weight. Then we appeal, and if that fails, we find another way. I'm not giving up. Why? She turned to face him. Why fight so hard for someone who crashed into your life? I've brought nothing but trouble. Jake considered the question, searching for the right words. Before you came, Ben and I were surviving, not living, going through motions. You reminded us, there's more. He looked at the stars. After Sarah died, I thought that part of life was over, that I had to focus on being a father, nothing else. And now? Now I know better. He met her gaze. You don't have to stay because you're grateful, or because you have nowhere else to go. But if you want to stay because this feels like home, then we want you to stay too. Elle's hand found his in the darkness. It does feel like home. You and Ben, you feel like family. They sat in companionable silence, watching their breath cloud in the cold night air. Hands entwined, the swing moving in gentle rhythm beneath them. The courtroom was packed the next morning. Richard Lockwood sat with his legal team, impeccably dressed, the picture of paternal concern. Jake, Elle, and their supporters filled the other side, a mismatched collection of mountain town residents united in purpose. Gavel rise, the bailiff called as Judge Martha Wilson entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s who, local legend had it, had once told a state senator where he could shove his development proposal. The proceedings began with clinical efficiency. Richard's doctors presented their testimonies, painting a picture of a troubled young woman with a history of instability. They spoke of medications, therapies, and the unfortunate episode of her flight. Elle sat straight back through it all, flinching occasionally but never looking away. When it was their turn, Jake's lawyer friend presented a different narrative. A woman who had survived unimaginable trauma, healed both physically and mentally, and integrated herself into a community that valued her. Dr. Morris testified about Elle's sound judgment and rapid recovery. Ben's teacher spoke of her patience and positive influence. Jake described finding her in the snow, the careful way she had rebuilt herself from fragments. Finally, Elle herself took the stand. Mrs. Lockwood, the judge said, in your own words, what are you asking this court to do? Elle took a deep breath. I'm asking for the freedom to choose my own path. I acknowledge that I am Eleanor Lockwood. I acknowledge that I used false documents to flee what I experienced as a controlling, abusive situation. I regret the deception, but not the escape. She looked directly at her father. I'm 30 years old. I have no history of mental illness that wasn't diagnosed by doctors on my father's payroll. I have never been a danger to myself or others. What I have been is an inconvenience to a man who sees me as an asset, not a daughter. The judge studied her thoughtfully. And what is your wish now? To stay in Pinecrest, to continue building the life I've found here, to legally change my name and make my own way, without the Lockwood fortune or the Lockwood chains. Richard Lockwood rose suddenly. Your Honor, I request a brief recess to speak with my daughter privately. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ms. Lockwood, do you wish to speak with your father? Elle hesitated, then nodded. Yes, one last time. They were given a small conference room. Jake watched anxiously as Elle and her father disappeared behind the door. 15 minutes later, they emerged. Richard Lockwood looked grim but composed. Elle's eyes were red-rimmed but dry. Your Honor, Richard announced, I'm withdrawing my petition for guardianship. My daughter has made her position clear, and while I disagree with her choices, I acknowledge her right to make them. Murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge studied him suspiciously. Mr. Lockwood, this is a sudden change of heart. Let's just say, I've been reminded of certain family values. His smile was tight. Eleanor will always have a place in our family should she choose to return. In the meantime, I wish her well with her new arrangements. The judge turned to Elle. Ms. Lockwood, is this resolution satisfactory to you? Elle nodded. It is, Your Honor. Thank you. Outside the courthouse, spring sunshine bathed the town square. Elle stood apart with her father for one final conversation, their body language stiff, but no longer hostile. When he left, climbing into his waiting car without looking back, she returned to Jake's side. What did you say to him? Jake asked. The truth, that I would fight him with everything I had, for as long as it took, that I'd go public with everything. The forced sedation, the threats, the way he tried to sell me in marriage to secure a business deal. She smiled sadly. And that despite all that, I still remember he taught me to ride a bike, came to my dance recitals, and kept my mother's garden alive after she died. That I didn't want to destroy him or the company, just to be free of both. And he accepted that. He's a businessman. He recognizes when the cost exceeds the benefit. Elle watched the car disappear down the mountain road. He'll tell everyone I'm taking time to find myself after my trauma. Save face, spin the story. It's what he does best. And what will you do? Jake asked, the question that had hung between them for months. Elle turned to him, then to Ben, who was building a paper airplane with Jake's lawyer on the courthouse steps. Then to the town square with its familiar faces going about their day. I'm going to legally change my name to Elle Carter, she said quietly. If that's all right with you. Start fresh, right here. Jake's heart stuttered. Carter? Too soon? Uncertainty crept into her voice. He took her hand. Not too soon, just unexpected. In the best way. 2 months later, as summer bloomed across the mountains, Elle officially became Elle Carter in a small ceremony in the town square. The same judge who had granted her freedom performed the wedding, Ben standing proudly as best man, the entire town in attendance. That evening they hosted a dinner at the cabin, now transformed with Elle's touches into a true home. The garden thrived, the kitchen was warm with cooking smells, and Ben's artwork covered the refrigerator. Drawings of 3 figures, hand in hand. As twilight settled over the mountains, the 3 of them walked the forest path behind the cabin. The snow had long since melted, wildflowers blooming where winter had reigned. Jake watched as Ben ran ahead, stopping to examine interesting rocks or call out the names of birds Elle had taught him. Happy? He asked, his arm around her waist. Elle leaned into him, watching Ben. Complete, she corrected. I feel complete. They continued down the path, following Ben's excited discoveries, their footprints pressing side by side into the soft earth of spring. 3 sets of tracks, moving forward together. If you believe in second chances, in love found when it's least expected, then maybe, like Jake and Elle, you'll understand. Sometimes, we aren't meant to save others. We're meant to find each other and save what's left of ourselves.